Everything you ever wanted to know about drones. Spoiler, the batteries are still the weak link. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet, and joining me is Dan Burton. He is the founder and CEO of Dronebase. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on today.
What is Dronebase all about?
Sure. So Dronebase is all about helping enterprise customers make better, faster decisions about their most critical assets via drone data. And we try to deliver that data quickly, affordably, and reliably.
As a matter of full disclosure, tell us about your relationship with DJI.
Sure. So DJI has invested in us 3 separate times. As most folks listening probably know, DJI is the dominant manufacturer of commercial, of drone hardware, both recreational and commercial. We've had a long relationship with them since back in kind of 2014, both with their SDK teams in Palo Alto, some of their marketing teams here in Los Angeles, where we are. And I've been going out to kind of Shenzhen, China, about twice a year to spend time at the DJI headquarters. So generally, we have a good sense of where they're taking product, where they're taking their SDK, and what we might expect next for them. It's an important relationship for us.
Why did you start Dronebase?
Sure. So I was, it was like 10 years ago now, I was in the military. I was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. And so during deployments on a ship, and then also to Iraq, Afghanistan, a couple other countries, just had kind of early access to drones and drone technology, and saw this technology fundamentally transform how we did business in the infantry. So while I was really watched this technology kind of computerize and miniaturize. When I got in, kind of a drone was a Global Hawk. It was like kind of a mainframe computer, takes off, looks like an airplane, takes off from a runway, lands on a runway, takes a couple real life pilots to fly, remotely. It took about actually 50 people to operate the entire system, even though no one was on it, and cost like probably over $100 million. Then, saw Predator Reaper was a little smaller system, but still took off from a runway, landed on a runway, took an actual pilot to fly. But then, interestingly enough, the systems got smaller to where a Scan Eagle system could be, it's a small kind of platform launch drone. A battalion, say, of 800 folks would get assigned this air asset. And you could put it on a little postage stamp patrol base and we kind of take off, fly, get you video and data, and kind of come in and crash land on a wire. And then by the time I was getting out, I could send infantrymen who really hadn't been to college to a 2 to 4 week training class. They come back with a backpack drone, and we would have that at our company of 200 people. So really was this amazing kind of democratization and decentralization of the air, where I used to have to beg a colonel or general for air support for 10 minutes of a 10-hour patrol, but these systems allowed even small ground units to have access to the air. And I mean, interestingly enough, this exact same transformation is happening in the business and commercial context, which is that, sure, like ExxonMobil has an aviation department, huge governments, militaries have air forces, but really most businesses have not had access to this amazing resource above us, the air. And we really believe that by giving even mainstream businesses access to the air, they'll get unprecedented data of their most critical properties, work sites, et cetera, and will transform the way that they do business, just like these systems transform the way the military does business.
What kind of technology are manufacturers putting into the consumer drones to make them easier and safer to fly?
Yeah, of course. I think that's maybe, that's really been the story of drone technology, is kind of 5 or 6 different kind of components of that technology, each getting kind of exponentially, asymptotically better every 6 months. Everything besides the battery, of course, which just kind of remains at 20 minutes persistently, no matter what anyone does. That's a really hard problem. If you solve that, we'll all be grateful. But yeah, I would say, like, for example, right, if I think of a DJI drone, so 4 or 5 years ago when I left the military, I was just making my own systems, right? So wiring, soldering, lightly programming together drones and drone kits. We'd make a lot of just purely bespoke systems. We also made a lot of DJI kits. That's actually the first time I heard of DJI was making a bunch of the early DJI kits. So we already kind of knew they would be a prevalent winner, right? But that was a limiter to the space, just in the sense that if you're making your own, like if I didn't solder the fourth wire into the third base plate properly, it would come undone during a flight and like the whole system would flip upside down or something crazy. So just getting to mass production of these systems, and really DJI having led the charge on that, really having what we really feel like those DJI systems almost exist as an iPhone in our space, which helps us. So Dronebase has completed over 100,000 commercial drone missions in all 50 US states and over 70 countries. So for us, it's actually really helpful just to have hardware be a more or less solved problem, where if we task a pilot in Colombia or Morocco or Washington State or Texas, if they're using a DJI Phantom 4 Pro, Dronebase's software speaks to that drone. We know we'll have a 20 megapixel camera. We know that imagery will be geo-referenced and date timestamped. We know that that will come with certain onboard safety tools that will prevent a crash. It's just really helpful to have that hardware piece solved. So I think as just mass production helped, I'd say that the cameras have gotten better and better. I used to attach kind of a fisheye GoPro onto a DJI system. They've gone very deep into camera and imaging technology, where now we're working at kind of 20 megapixel or above imagery, that it is very precise to its latitude, longitude, and altitude. We're seeing a proliferation of other sensors like FLIR thermal sensors, which give you new types of data, not just imagery. So that's very helpful. And then I'd say in a more sophisticated sense, the drones are getting smarter. It's getting harder and harder for the systems to crash, which is good. That's largely come via some computer vision sensors, front-facing, down-facing, up-facing on the latest drone systems, where you have very clear indicators when you're 5 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet from an object. The object, the drone will halt itself and not allow you to go closer at a certain radius, right? So just kind of preventing some of the early mistakes you could make back in 2012 or 2013 has helped. So many different technologies really converging and getting better all at once.
You mentioned 100,000 commercial flights and I think 70 different countries. So how is machine learning and artificial intelligence playing a role in simplifying the drone piloting and allowing you to use all of the data you're collecting?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, again, to that point, Dronebase helps enterprises make decisions. Often that decision is based on data and imagery that we collect with a drone, right? So I'd say, two things. I think that we think quite a bit about just solving the simple problem of being able to acquire drone data at scale. We're the largest kind of drone operations company, having completed, like I said, over hundreds of thousands of missions in 70 different countries. So we think a lot, before we even get to more sophisticated technologies of machine learning and AI, we just think in a basic sense, can we deliver drone data in a way that is fast, affordable, reliable? For example, in the United States, if a large insurance company sends an address to our API, we generally are okay to sign up for 48 to 72 hour turnarounds from basically any US address to get them drone data back via our API. Over those 100,000 flights, I think we have about a 99.5% success rate, meaning we only refly in 0.5% of cases. We're trying to get that down to more like 0.1. But I'd say that even before we get to very sophisticated technologies, there's still just this big infrastructure problem to solve of being able to get drone data as reliably as folks get, say, satellite data today. Then I think, as you point out, once that core infrastructure is stood up and we're able to deliver drone data from most places in the world in a relatively quick, affordable, reliable fashion, I think that increasingly helping customers get a decision from that data is really important. So machine learning has probably been used most in the context of our space of if you're doing kind of recognition of a certain type of damage, say hail damage, or you're trying to call out a worksite anomaly, let's say a spill or an overflow of a worksite. Machine learning is a great way to open up an algorithm and kind of use it across a huge number of imagery that's being collected to help you increasingly make that decision in an automated fashion. AI is a very general term. I mean, the way we think about it is that we want to get smarter every single drone flight. So right now, the pilot does some of the work, the drone does some of the work. Automation is absolutely coming to the drone space. We try to layer that automation in over time. So if you're building a map, that should be automated. If you're taking panorama images, that should be automated. There are still tasks that are manual with a drone pilot, where having a human being at the controls is still really important. But we think, increasingly over time, the drone will do more and more of the flying. So what we tend to focus on here at Dronebase is more, what is the highest value? What is the best task that a human can do during a drone flight? And that may actually not be flying the drone.
What are your recommendations for people who are new to drone piloting, and what should they look for in their first drone?
Sure. It's a great question. So that's the whole other half of our business is we think a lot about drone pilots. We think about the pilot's journey from kind of the recreational user that went out and bought their first DJI Spark to that initial commercial user who maybe they just got their FAA Part 107 and they bought a DJI Phantom 4 Pro. And then we think about how do we professionalize that person to become a true enterprise drone pilot who maybe bought a DJI M210 that has a, image sensor, thermal sensor, and a really robust, package of auto flight. So to your point there, I mean, so I'd say we focus a lot on commercial pilots. So table stakes there is that the FAA actually has I give them a lot of credit for getting to where they've gotten in the commercial drone space. Today, to become a commercial drone pilot, you need to go take the FAA's in the United States, you need to take the FAA's Part 107 exam. You study for that it could be either a really boring weekend or maybe over a span of 2 to 3 weeks, you can study for this. And you go to an FAA test site and you take a one-time written test. And then you're given a commercial drone operator's license. You also get a TSA background check, which is the same background check that a TSA employee would get. Once you have that license, you're able to operate under certain clear posted rules that are pretty straightforward. And then at that point, if you've just gotten your Part 107, a lot of pilots will reach out to Dronebase for some initial commercial tasks. We typically would think of appropriate early commercial tasks as doing something simple like getting video or image content for our partners like Getty Images, just from a stock footage context. Just taking a really simple 20-second drone video couldn't get much easier than that. And then we tend to think of kind of some residential real estate use cases as an appropriate kind of initial commercial task. From there, we really like to kind of qualify, screen, and onboard pilots into enterprise applications. And that could be insurance or construction or kind of energy, as well as telecom. Those are each fairly unique. Those are at Dronebase, each of those has its own training and screening process. And we'll typically give pilots kind of badges as they pass through each of those training programs.
Dan, what are some of the important ethical issues that pilots must consider when flying commercially or for fun?
Sure. Look, it's a great question. This is a new technology that most people associate with the military. So it's something I tell our team all the time. I think that we have kind of an above average task to earn our customers' trust. We're taking a flying robot to someone's work site, and we're going to pull proprietary data from that worksite that's going to live on our cloud. So you can expect just like a higher bar across every interaction with a customer as you do commercial drone work. I'd say that, so I mean, first of all, ethical issues, right? Number one is that safety has to be the top priority. Our whole industry is, one bad headline away from more onerous regulations. So no one wants to be that pilot that causes an issue in the space, or kind of, where the regulations are going have actually been quite helpful and straightforward. So that's a good positive thing. So I'd say, first of all, safety is the number one priority. Pilots should, even a recreational pilot, should have some familiarity with airspace. You should know what airspace you're in, right? Whether that is Class G unrestricted airspace, which is kind of the majority of the United States, or whether you're in some class of restricted airspace. Now, DJI's technology or a company like AirMap's technology can help give you a sense of what airspace you are in, but that's important to know first and foremost, right? Could there plausibly be anything else around you in the air? We always give the pilot the final decision on go, no go to fly. So even if we are in the right airspace, we have all the waivers, everything is correct. If the pilot doesn't like the weather conditions, they just feel like there's too much happening at this work site. We thought it would be quiet at 6 a.m., but it's actually kind of active. We always let the pilot make the final determination on safety. I think that's usually the right call. Let the man or woman on the ground make that decision. So I'd say that, first, ethically, is just safety has to be a top priority.
How's the FAA working with the drone community to support wider use?
Yeah, again, I think that the U.S. felt like it was behind 2 to 3 years ago, but now I actually feel like we have one of the best frameworks in the world to perform commercial drone work in the country, which is very positive. So look, when the CAA initially set up airspace, 50, 60 years ago, it was done in kind of a thoughtful, clear, simple, egalitarian fashion. It's been an evolution in the drone space. This technology was not contemplated when we first set up airspace rules, right? But I'd say that there were no rules that 5, 6 years ago. Then at one point, all commercial drone activity was illegal. And then you could apply to get what's called a 333 exemption to current law. So Dronebase had 2 different 333 exemptions. And then I think but you had to have a pilot's license to, full on a glider's license or above to fly a drone commercially. And where they've gone to now is, I think, Part 107, a commercial drone operator's license. To me, that feels like an appropriate level of training, knowledge, et cetera, to do commercial drone work. That was a big win from last year. And then I think what's been the big win this year is the FAA has rolled out what they call their Lance program. So, for example, Dronebase last year was saying no to about 25 to 30% of work because the addresses fell within some class of restricted airspace. The FAA's Lance program, we're one of the 4 companies that are built in to be able to programmatically check and clear restricted airspace for commercial drone flights. So that's going to take our no's from like 20 to 35% no to more like 1% no, and let us operate substantially in 99% of U.S. airspace. And what they've done there is 2 things that are good. One, they've rethought air from a drone perspective. So if I were to look around, if you're in Colorado, if I was to look around like the Denver airport, the FAA has now redrawn that airspace where, okay, if I'm 2 feet off the runway at Denver, I shouldn't fly a drone, and they're going to tell me not to fly a drone, right? But if I'm 200 feet from not near the runway, maybe they'll approve me to fly my drone 50 feet. If I'm a mile away, maybe they'll approve me to fly 200 feet. If I'm 4 miles away, they might approve me to fly 350 feet. So it's a thoughtful kind of inverted cone around each airport. And I'd say I give them a lot of credit too. They're building this in a very technology forward fashion. The government actually has an API that drone companies can plug into where we can programmatically check and clear restricted airspace. So those are 2 really positive developments that I think they're really thinking this in a forward-leaning fashion.
Okay, Dan, what does the future hold for drones?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a future I think we're really excited for. I mean, at Dronebase, uh, we're imagining a world with tens of millions of drone flights a year. I'm imagining a world where I look out my window and, below the horizon, I see buildings, trains, and all of kind of human ingenuity. And I think there's a world where we look above the horizon and we see an active, busy sky kind of filled with human innovation as well. I'm excited for that future. I think that you will increasingly see that those drone flights yielding drone data that become just a fundamental part of many businesses' workflows and how business gets done and how business makes decisions. Really, with just envisioning the sky not just as an important but really an indispensable source of vital business data, with Dronebase being the leading way that companies acquire it.
Well, Dan, there's a lot to learn. It's a brand new industry and a lot's changing. Thanks again for joining and shedding some light on the work that you're doing as well as the industry as a whole. If somebody wants to connect with you or maybe they want to find out more about your work at Dronebase, how can they do that?
Of course, I would please come to dronebase.com. You can learn about our opportunities for customers and then our opportunities for drone pilots as well.
All right, thanks again. And if you guys want to follow me and more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic. Or maybe go to my website, tonyahall.net. I have links to all my social sites, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. In fact, if you'd love to chat, I'd love to hear from you. But Tonya Hall Radio on Twitter. And thanks for listening.